Hello friends, welcome. Today I want to talk about mental health care for criminals because they're very mentally ill, most of them. They've got corruptions of the mind, many of them got great addiction to crime, and so it's a very addictive thing, like gambling, stealing. It becomes a bit of a thrill doing it to them, or whatever type of crime it is. It's a thrill doing it to them, and they are also very compulsive, and many of them obsessively have obsessive compulsive disorder. You put criminals into prison and you punishing them for having a mental illness. Do negativity to negativity, end result negativity. So they come back out, and 57 to just over 70% of criminals reoffend. And that's horrendous, isn't it? They can't even get a 50% cure rate because of the way they're treating them. And that makes them resentful being punished. They take their licks, they come back out, they do crime again. Part of it's because they're resentful and they want retribution. They want to have their own back and get their own back. So they're misfits in society because they've become very negative individuals, many of them. And they just don't feel they can fit in and different things. Now, they did a trial in Scotland a number of years ago in Glasgow. Now, Glasgow's the murder capital of the UK. There's a lot of gangsters there, gangs and different things, a lot of drugs and different things there, vice and whatever else criminals do. And they're fighting each other and all sorts, these gangs. What they decided to do, the police, in conjunction with the prison service and the mental health care service, was to take the gently approach. And they had some of the worst thugs, the worst gangsters, and they gave them mental health care, and they treated them well, and they helped them as much as what they could. I don't know if they had counselling or not, but they were helped as much as they could and had a great result out of it, really positive result out of it, of helping many of them to get on the straight and narrow and stay there. And did the UK government adopt that? No, because it took a bit longer and it cost a little bit more, and well, it's cheaper to just slam them in prison and punish them and let them back out to carry on doing crime in the majority of cases. So that's because they're penny pinching, the governments. They want to do the cheapest method every time without fail, and it doesn't work very well. So out of that 57 to just over 70% of reoffenders, that's including the new criminals that go in and can't do porridge. They can't do hard time. They go stir crazy. They won't ever go back. So they sort of don't cure themselves completely, but they resist ever doing a crime again because they cannot face going back to prison. So that's including them in the results. So the real figures of hardened criminals that will go in there, do porridge, and take their licks and come back out and carry on crime is probably more like between 80 and 95% of hardened criminals are reoffending. So that's horrendous, isn't it? But we've got to look at this, and we've got to recognise every single criminal has got a corruption of the mind, or a mental illness, or multiple mental illnesses in most cases, and the problems of that. And so if you go put them in prison, you punish them, it's the worst thing you could do because it's just making them even more negative. So there is a need for better conditions for criminals, so criminal mental health care prisons, or hospitals, they should be called criminal mental health care hospitals, and they should be, new constructions that have got much better accommodation, where they've got 2 people to a room rather than squashing 3 or 4 in a tiny little cell, because they're treated inhumanely, and that just makes them act inhumanely and want revenge. Having reasonable standards. Now, when they go into that system, they should have a minimum sentence. of the minimum amount of time they should be in there, and that's the punishment side of it. They have their freedom taken away from them because they're still locked up in a mental health hospital for criminals. And that in there, it's all about helping them. It's not about punishing them. We've got to stop punishing criminals because it just makes them worse than they already are. We've got to start helping them to get the mental health care they deserve. And everybody that's mentally ill deserves mental health care, and there's virtually none of it ever done, other than with a very few real psychos that they put in mental health care. And they do have good results with those, but they won't adopt it in normal prisons and such like. But that's where you start, in normal prisons. Then you build the hospitals for them, the mental health care hospitals that are secure. And it should be, they start off from the basic level. They get counselling, therapies, hypnotherapy to help them sort out their problems, some medication maybe to help their condition, but medication, it's just suppressants, isn't it? So, and then reward systems. So the more they achieve, and their sentence should say, once you have served your time, if you are not mentally cured by that time, you will stay in there until you are. Because letting them back out with those conditions, they're going to do the same thing, aren't they? So it is about keeping them in longer if you have to. And it encourages them, because most criminals are not motivated to get better. But if you know you can't get your freedom until you're cured, you're sure going to try hard then after a short time, aren't you? And it should be a reward system. For the better they get, the more rewards they get and privileges they get to say, well done, and encourage them to do more. And if they are bad, then they go back a step. If they improve, they go forward a step and get more privileges, and encourage them to help themselves. So again, it's all the same things as the normal mental health care system: counselling, therapies, anything that can help them to keep taking steps forward. Ex-criminals that have made a good life for themselves. They don't have to be multimillionaires. We're just talking about an ordinary person that's gone out there, turned themselves around and made good of themselves. And, that's the way it needs to go, isn't it? For criminals, we need to address their mental health care if we're ever going to cure them. And it's when they do get out as well, you've got to follow it up. You can't just abandon them out there to sleep on a park bench and think they're not going to go back to crime again. It's all they know. It is their most vulnerable time. Even if you've cured them, you kick them out the door and leave them to it, and they've got nothing out there. It's, the last thing they did in society was crime. They go back to it, many of them, won't they? Of course. So you've got to give support outside in society. You've got to house them. You've got to get them into some sort of work. And they can work for the local councils or the government, sweeping roads, clearing litter, painting things. There's loads of clearing ditches, trimming hedges. There's loads and loads and loads of things they can do to begin with that are trusted positions, because there's not much opportunity to steal anything. And then they progress up the ladder of getting more trust given to them and better jobs. So it's about the government supporting that. So you've got to house them so they've got somewhere secure to live rather than a park bench or dossing on somebody's sofa if they can manage that for a few weeks. So it's about getting them housed. And this is about creating a society for all of us to feel safer in. And within 5 to 10 years of starting that system for all criminals, well, you're going to have a lot less criminals going into prison, because they'll be going through that system by then. And many, many more, probably over 50%, will be cured if you continue with the therapies, the counselling, the mental health care, the structure of getting them feeling secure, getting them in some sort of job, even if it's a government job, getting paid by governments, and different things like this. So it's about one step at a time. You can't get 100% cure, but you can get a well over 50% cure probably of that. And you're decreasing criminals all the time. You get it under 50% in society, because at the moment the number's growing year by year. There's more and more crime happening, and we have really got to combat this. And you're never going to do it by punishing criminals. You're only ever going to do it through healthcare for criminals in secure units, and that will take them to that better place where they're willing to help themselves. And some of them might begrudge helping themselves to start off with because they have chronic addictions, chronic compulsions, obsessive disorders, other derangements, violent behaviour. Whatever it is, you can end up helping a lot of it if you care enough to do that. And it's about counselling, therapy, and all these different things to help them do that, isn't it? And I'm not saying there isn't a room for psychiatry to some amount, but suppression is really not the way to cure, is it? So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. But I feel very strongly that doing negative things to already negative people isn't making them more positive, is it? Doing positive things to negative people has got a much better chance of helping them and helping them get on the straight and narrow and avoid doing crime again. Now, when they come out, they do need long-term, not short-term like it is at the moment. They do need long-term tracking and monitoring if possible, especially for the most dangerous ones. They need monitoring because violent crime is spiralling out of control now. Over 70% of the crimes in this country are violent. They include violence. So the other thing is those domestic violence, those people should be sectioned, not sectioned. Those people should be given a mental health care thing to do if they're being violent to their partner. The police should be able to issue that. They go to a 10-week course on controlling their anger, their masculinity, or different things, both men and women, because there are some very violent women out there too, into going into counselling. And that's what they need, counselling and, help to learn to control their violent tendencies or whatever it happened to be, or their aggression or their mental, because some of them are very mentally ill, the people that are violent to other people. So, deranged quite often. So we need to stop that too. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that, friends. Love and light to you. Bless you. Neil.